Deputy Governor of the Bank of England, so no stranger to thorny issues. John, in your speech, we're in the London River and Steam Museum. This has a place in London's water history. You compared what you've had to look at as our great stink moment. Just tell people what that means.
Well, back in 1858, the Thames had become an open sewer. London's infrastructure hadn't kept up with population and economic development growth. And then hot, dry summer, the Thames just became, in the words of politicians, pestilential and the like. And it got to the point where Parliament was disabled by it. They could not operate. The stench was so great. And the newspapers called it the Great Stink of 1858. And I mentioned it because, look, we're much better off today. We've got drinking water and sanitation unimaginable all those years ago. But when it happened in 1858, that's what launched the huge building of sewers and water mains in London. It took a long time to build that infrastructure, but the health of London was transformed and its environment was transformed. And in some ways what we see is similar at the moment. We have an infrastructure that is not coping with the demands we're putting on it. We have problems that keep happening. We have lots of debates and arguments about what's the right system, etc. And I think, and certainly the public anger about pollution in particular, we've reached a moment like that as well. And I think that's what the government had in mind when it said it wanted a reset. So I compared it. It's different, of course, but I hope this is a reset moment, and I hope our report will contribute to that.
So it's a metaphorical stink at the very least. Your central recommendation, replacing the regulator, is the regulator here, which has been trying to manage this industry, carrying the can?
So first of all, that's one of our recommendations. We have, look, we came to the conclusion that there was no one thing you could fix, no matter how radical you were, that would suddenly transform the system overnight. You have to deal with a number of things. A lot of the responsibility lies with government. I think government for not setting direction, government for willing the ends without the means, and the like, and the government for not taking the decisions that would have allowed the regulators to balance their responsibilities. A lot of the responsibilities with companies. Some companies over past decades have acted, I said in the speech, have acted in line with their private interest, but not in line with the public interest. The question is, in a system of regulated private monopolies, how do you ensure that those companies align with the public interest? And regulation is how one does that. And it has worked in the past in the water industry, but it needs to be reformed and to work again.
How do you hold them to account? Because the government ruled out nationalisation, which many people think is the answer here, so you couldn't consider that. So how do you regulate companies that have shown that they have been happy to take money out of the system while not investing in its future?
So the first thing I'd say is I'm quite old, and I can remember life before privatisation, when the UK was the dirty man of Europe because we couldn't invest in our water systems and when leakage was high. So it's not, to me, axiomatic, inevitable that the problems we face are the problems of privatisation. I think they're problems of failures in the system. Companies can be held to account. A lot of the powers that Ofwat now has will do that. They just haven't had the powers for a long time. And over the period we're talking about, remember, some of the problems we're seeing in companies didn't happen overnight. I mean, these are deep-rooted problems, and the seeds of over-leverage and damage to financial resilience were sown quite a few years ago at a time the regulator was being encouraged to be light touch, to be outcomes-focused, not to check, and the regulator didn't have the powers, and the space opened up, I think, for what we've seen.
And one more, if I may. Bills, actually, in real terms, have stayed pretty low through that previous regime. You've said this morning, and others agree, bills are going to rise. But you've also talked about the need to give investors a return. And the market has changed in the last few years. Raising money is more expensive. Do the public have to accept that this investment is going to come at a price, and some of that price will go to investors, to the very companies with whom they're so angry?
So, infrastructure has to be paid for, and ultimately it's paid for by the bill payers. and the like, but we want to finance it so that we spread those costs over time. If you're building for 60 years, you don't really want to charge people over the next 5 years for that. So we need to spread it over time, and there are risks in running a water company. Yes, it's a regulated monopoly, but yes, things can go wrong, and capital has to bear that risk. So I think when companies are delivering what they're set up to do, when the private interests of the shareholders are lined up with the public interests in producing water, sanitation, respecting the environment, those returns will come out. And whether it's publicly owned or privately owned, there will need to be borrowing to finance this, and borrowing costs go up. But that is part of, it's like your mortgage. You're spreading the cost of something that you hope to enjoy for a long time over a long period. And those costs will have to be paid.
Hence the focus on the regulator. Sir Jon Cunliffe, thank you very much for joining us here on Sky News.